Max had always lived a quiet life in the small town of Riverside. He worked at a local mechanic shop, spent his evenings alone, and found comfort in the simplicity of his routine. There were no grand adventures or extraordinary moments. The days passed by like the steady hum of his shop's engine. But that night, everything was about to change. It was a chilly evening when Max decided to take a walk down the quiet wooded path near his house. The stars twinkled brightly in the sky, and the world felt calm. He had just finished his shift and needed some fresh air to clear his mind. As he walked deeper into the woods, something strange caught his eye. A bright light, shining like a star, flickering through the trees. Curious, Max moved closer, his steps quickening. The light seemed to pulse, almost as if it was calling him. When he reached the source of the light, he found something he could not explain. There, lying in the grass, was a large glowing object. It was not a plane, a satellite, or anything he had ever seen before. Max stood frozen for a moment, his heart racing. The object was sleek and metallic, almost beautiful in its design. The light was now dimming, but the object still shimmered in the moonlight. He approached cautiously, and that's when he noticed a figure beside it. A figure unlike any human he had ever seen. It was a woman. No, not a woman, Max quickly realized. The creature was too otherworldly. Her skin was a pale blue, almost violet, and she had delicate pointed ears that extended just slightly from her head. Her eyes were closed, and she appeared to be unconscious. She wore a flowing gown made of strange material that shimmered with an iridescent glow. Max's first instinct was to run. He had no idea what this was, and it scared him. But something deep inside told him that he could not leave her there. He had to help, even though he didn't know how. "Hey, are you okay?" Max called out, his voice trembling slightly. The creature's eyes opened, and Max gasped. They were a deep shade of silver, glimmering with an intensity he had never seen before. She blinked, looking confused and weak. Max crouched down beside her, unsure of what to do. She struggled to sit up, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Max hesitated but then gently placed a hand on her arm. "Can I help you?" he asked again, his voice softer now. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Then, in a voice that sounded almost like a soft melody, she spoke. "Please, I need help. I'm lost." Max's heart skipped a beat. Lost? What did she mean by that? And where had she come from? "Who are you?" he asked, his curiosity growing. He still couldn't shake the feeling that this was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. "I am Izera," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "I come from a distant world, far from here." Max blinked in disbelief. A world. This was no ordinary person. No, she was something else entirely. You're an alien?" he asked, barely believing his own words. Izera nodded slowly. "Yes, and I have nowhere to go." Max felt a chill run down his spine. An alien, right here, on Earth. He could hardly believe it, but the strange figure before him made it impossible to deny. Yet despite the fear that crept up on him, a feeling of compassion tugged at his heart. Izera looked up at him with eyes full of loneliness and desperation, and it was then that Max knew something extraordinary was happening, something that would change his life forever. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Will you help me?" Max could hardly believe what he had just heard. An alien. From another world. It seemed impossible, like something from a science fiction movie. But as he looked into Izera's silver eyes, filled with sorrow and desperation, something in him stirred. This was real. She was real. And she needed his help. Izera sat up slowly, her movements delicate, almost fragile. The faint glow of her gown shimmered in the dim light as she spoke again, her voice soft but filled with a quiet power. "I've been alone for so long," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people are gone. My world is gone." Her words seemed to hang in the air like a heavy weight. Max could see the pain in her eyes, the years of loneliness and loss that she carried with her. "I was sent here, to Earth, by fate. But now, I have nothing." Max felt a deep sense of sadness for her. He had lived a lonely life, but this was beyond anything he could imagine. He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, silently listening. "I am Azera," she continued, "a queen from a faraway planet. My species was destroyed in a terrible war. I was the last of my kind. Alone. For centuries." Max blinked. A queen. Alone for centuries. He couldn't wrap his head around it. The idea of losing everything, of being the last one left, was unimaginable. But Azera wasn't just any alien. She was a queen, and that meant something. I don't understand," Max said, his voice filled with confusion. "Why are you here, on Earth? Why me?" Azera turned her gaze toward him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "I was sent here to find a mate. Only a human can help me break the curse of loneliness. Only a human can save me." Max felt a strange chill run down his spine. A mate? He was just an ordinary guy, a mechanic with no real experience in anything like this. Why would she think that he could help her? But as her words sank in, he began to understand. Azera wasn't just an alien. She was a queen, and she needed something that only he, a human, could offer. "I don't know if I can help you," Max said quietly, unsure of what to feel. I'm not anyone special." Azera's expression softened, and she placed a hand gently on his arm. Her touch was warm, despite her alien nature. "It is not about being special," she said. "It is about connection. I have been alone for so long. I need someone who understands, someone who can truly be with me, share this burden." Max stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. She was asking him for something he wasn't sure he was ready for. But there was a part of him, deep inside, that couldn't turn away. The loneliness he had felt for so many years seemed small in comparison to what Azera had endured. "What do you need from me?" Max asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Azera met his gaze, her eyes filled with both sadness and longing. "I need you to stay with me, to help me rebuild, to be my partner, my equal. Only then can I truly break free from this curse." Max's heart raced. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. But looking at Azera, seeing her vulnerability and strength all at once, he knew that he couldn't leave her. Not now. I'll stay," Max said, his voice firm now. "I'll help you. We'll figure this out." Azera smiled softly, a look of gratitude and relief crossing her face. She had found someone who would stand by her side. And for the first time in centuries, Azera didn't feel quite so alone anymore. The days that followed Max's decision to help Azera were strange, filled with new experiences and a constant sense of wonder. Max had always considered himself an ordinary guy, quiet, hardworking, and stuck in the same routine. But now, as he spent more time with Azera, he realized how extraordinary his life had just become. Azera's presence was unlike anything he had ever known. Her beauty was alien, but it was her gentleness, her vulnerability, that truly captivated him. She seemed so different from everyone Max had known, yet there was something familiar about her loneliness that resonated with him. In many ways, Max understood what it was like to feel isolated, to long for connection. But Azera's isolation went beyond anything he could imagine. Centuries of being the last of her kind, separated from any sense of belonging. One evening, as they sat together outside under the stars, Azera shared more of her past with Max. She spoke of her world, a planet once vibrant and full of life, now reduced to ruins. Her people had been powerful, respected throughout the galaxy, but their enemies were relentless. Azera had been forced to flee, leaving behind everything she had ever known. "I was the last to survive," she said, her voice soft but full of sadness. I watched as everything I loved was destroyed. And now, I am nothing but a shadow of who I once was." Max listened quietly, his heart aching for her. He couldn't imagine the weight she carried, the pain of watching her people perish, knowing she was the only one left. But as she spoke, he saw something else in her eyes. There was still hope there, hope that he, a simple human, could help her rebuild, even if she didn't fully understand how. "I don't know how to fix what's been broken," Max said, his voice sincere, "but I'll do my best. You don't have to be alone anymore." Azera turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. She studied him for a long moment, and for the first time, Max saw a genuine smile tug at the corners of her lips. "You are kind," she said softly. "I never thought I would find someone like you." Their connection was growing stronger, though neither of them quite knew where it would lead. Max wasn't sure what he had agreed to when he first decided to help her, but as the days passed, he found himself learning about her world, her people, and her hopes for the future. Azera had a deep well of knowledge, and Max was eager to soak it all in. She taught him about the alien technology that had brought her to Earth, explaining how she had been sent here by a higher power, guided by the stars. But despite the wonders she shared, Max could feel the weight of her loneliness still hanging over them. She had opened up to him, sharing the most painful parts of her past, and he couldn't help but feel protective of her. Azera had lived so long in isolation, and now she had placed her trust in him. He couldn't turn back now. As they spent more time together, Max realized that he wasn't just helping Azera, he was changing too. He found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else. In a strange way, they were both healing from their pasts, learning from each other's pain and finding solace in their shared connection. It was clear that their bond was growing stronger every day. Max had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't so alone either. As the days passed, Max found himself becoming more deeply involved in Azera's world. She taught him about her planet, her people, and the complex web of politics that had once surrounded her. Yet, as much as he was learning, something still nagged at him. Azera had asked him to stay, to be her partner, but the reality of her request was slowly sinking in. Max had lived a simple life, always grounded by the familiar comforts of Earth, his job, his friends, and the routines he knew so well. But now, Azera was asking him to leave all of that behind. She wanted him to join her, to help rebuild her life and her world. It felt like such a big decision, a choice that could change everything. One evening, Max sat in the small clearing behind his house, staring up at the stars. The same stars that Azera had once gazed at from her distant planet. Azera had said she was sent here to find someone who could help her break free from her loneliness. But now, as Max thought about it, the weight of her request felt almost too much to bear. He had always been an ordinary man, no special skills, no royal blood, just a guy who worked in a mechanic shop, trying to make a living. The thought of joining an alien queen in a fight for survival, to help her rule a new future, seemed absurd. He didn't know how to lead or how to rebuild an entire society. How could he, a human, be the one to help her? "What am I doing?" Max whispered to himself. "I'm not like her. I'm not a ruler. I'm just a guy who fixes cars." The decision felt too big. He had no training in leadership, no experience in politics, no knowledge of alien technology or culture. And yet, Azera believed in him. She had placed her trust in him. And for reasons he couldn't fully understand, he didn't want to let her down. As if hearing his thoughts, Azera appeared from behind him. She stood silently for a moment, her silver eyes gazing at him with an intensity that made Max's heart race. "I can see the doubt in your eyes," she said softly. "I can feel your hesitation, Max." Max turned to her, his brow furrowing. "I'm not sure I can do this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're asking me to give up everything, to leave behind everything I know. I don't know how to help you, Azera. I'm just Me. Azera stepped closer, her presence calming. You think you have nothing to offer, she said, her voice tender. But you have something far more valuable than knowledge or power. You have your heart. You have the ability to care, to protect, to love. That is what I need, Max. Not a ruler, but a partner. Max swallowed hard. Her words pierced through the layers of doubt and fear that had been building inside him. Could he really do this? Could he give up everything for a future with Azera? I don't know what to say, Max murmured. This isn't what I imagined for my life. Azera reached out and gently placed her hand on his. I never imagined I would meet someone like you, but sometimes destiny has a way of bringing two souls together, no matter how different they may be. You have already helped me more than you know, just by staying with me. Max stared at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of her touch. For the first time, the fear began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of determination. Azera was right. He wasn't the same as her, but that didn't mean he couldn't be what she needed. Maybe together, they could figure this out. All right, Max said, his voice stronger now. I'll stay. I'll help you. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Azera smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Max. You have no idea how much this means to me. And with that, Max knew that his life would never be the same. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a part of something much bigger than himself, and he would do whatever it took to help Azera and her people rebuild their world. The days turned into weeks, and Max began to settle into his new life with Azera. He was still trying to wrap his mind around everything that had happened. One minute, he was an ordinary mechanic, living a quiet life in a small town. The next, he was helping an alien queen rebuild her world, with no idea what the future would bring. But despite the uncertainty, something inside him kept him grounded. Azera was no longer a stranger to him. She was becoming his friend, his partner, in a way he never thought was possible. Her company had a calming effect on him. And the more time they spent together, the more he realized how deeply he cared for her. Azera had shared everything with him. Her past, her people, the war that had destroyed her species, and the loneliness that had haunted her for centuries. Max had listened to every word, feeling the weight of her loss, her grief. It was difficult to imagine the pain she must have felt, but her strength amazed him. She had survived so much, and now she had placed her trust in him. One evening, they stood on the balcony of the small house Azera had made her home on Earth. The night was quiet, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Azera turned to Max, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. I never imagined this, Azera said softly. That I would find someone like you, someone who would stay with me, who would help me. I never thought I would be free of my loneliness. Max looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. You're not alone anymore, he said, his voice steady. I promised I'd help you, and I will. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Azera smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was the first time he had seen her smile without any trace of sadness. In that moment, Max knew he had made the right choice. The weight of the decision still lingered, but he no longer felt as lost or uncertain as he had before. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a sudden flash of light in the distance. Max turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw a small ship descending from the sky. It was sleek and fast, not like anything he had ever seen. Azera's face tightened as she saw the ship too. They found me, she whispered, her voice filled with both fear and determination. Max's heart skipped a beat. Who? The ones who destroyed my people. They know I'm alive, and they won't let me rebuild. They want to finish what they started. Max felt his chest tighten with worry. He had known that helping Azera wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. The enemies of Azera's people were coming for her, and now they were coming for him too. Azera's hand found his, and she squeezed it gently. "You've already made a choice, Max," she said. "We will fight together, and we will win, no matter what." Max nodded, a sense of resolve settling over him. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't turning back. They had come this far together, and no enemy, no matter how powerful, was going to tear them apart. "We'll face this together," Max said, his voice firm. "We'll protect each other. I won't leave you." Azera. As the ship drew closer, Max and Azera stood side by side, ready to face whatever danger awaited them. Together, they would fight for their future, for the chance to rebuild, and find the peace that had been stolen from them both. The unknown was terrifying, but Max had made his promise. And now, there was no turning back. The tension in the air grew thick as the ship approached. Max stood beside Azera, both of them staring at the sleek, metallic craft descending slowly toward the ground. The once quiet night now felt heavy, charged with an unknown danger that Max could feel deep in his bones. He had known things would get difficult, but he hadn't expected the danger to arrive so soon. Azera's expression was calm, though there was a quiet storm in her eyes. "They've come," she said softly, almost to herself. "The remnants. The ones who destroyed my people." Max didn't know exactly who the remnants were, but he knew enough to understand that they were a force to be reckoned with. Azera had spoken of them before, alien conquerors who had waged war on her planet and wiped out her species. Now, it seemed they were coming for her again. The ship landed with a soft hum, and the sound of its engines slowly died down. The door to the craft slid open, and figures emerged from the shadows. They were tall, armored figures with cold, calculating eyes. Their dark uniforms were adorned with insignia Max didn't recognize, but he could feel the authority in their presence. These were not allies. They were enemies, and they were here for Azera. Max instinctively stepped closer to her, his heart pounding. Azera's presence beside him was steadying, but he could feel the danger in the air. She had faced these enemies before, but now she was not alone. He was standing with her, ready to protect her, no matter what it took. The leader of the group, a tall alien with sharp features and a voice like ice, stepped forward. "Azera," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I see you found a new companion. How predictable." Azera stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she met the alien's eyes. "I am not the same as I was," she replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. "And I will not be controlled by you any longer." The leader sneered. "You think you can rebuild what was lost? You are the last of your kind. No one will follow you. You are nothing but a relic." Max could feel the hostility in the air. He had never been a part of anything like this before. No galactic wars, no battles between alien races. But he knew one thing for sure: Azera wasn't going to let these people threaten her. And neither was he. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear that clawed at his chest. "You've underestimated her. She's more than just a queen. She's strong, and she's not alone anymore." The leader turned his cold gaze to Max, his eyes narrowing. "And you are?" he asked, as if Max was no more than an inconvenience. "I'm someone who's not going to let you destroy everything she's worked for," Max said, his voice firm. He wasn't sure where the courage was coming from, but he knew he couldn't stand by and watch Azera face this threat alone. Azera glanced at him, her silver eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that made Max realize just how much he had come to mean to her. Together, they would fight. Together, they would stand against the darkness. The alien leader smirked, clearly underestimating Max's resolve. "You're brave, human," he said, "but bravery alone won't save you." Max met his gaze, not backing down. "It's not just bravery. It's love. And that's more powerful than anything you can throw at us." The leader's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see about that," he said, raising his hand in a signal. At that moment, the tension exploded. The remnants were ready to fight, and Max and Azera were ready to defend their future. The battle had begun, and it was a fight neither of them would give up on. Max felt his heart racing, adrenaline flooding his body. He had never been in a fight like this before, but with Azera by his side, he knew one thing: no matter what happened, they would face it together. And that was the strongest weapon they had. The battle began swiftly. The remnants, with their cold, calculating strength, charged at Azera and Max with terrifying precision. Max had never imagined himself in the middle of a galactic confrontation, but as the first wave of soldiers advanced toward them, something inside him clicked. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Azera, ever the calm and focused queen, moved beside him with grace and confidence. She raised her hand, and a strange, glowing device appeared in her palm. It was one of her people's technologies, a weapon that Max had seen only in her stories. She activated it, and a beam of energy shot forward, knocking back several of the approaching soldiers. Max stared in awe. He was in over his head, but Azera wasn't. She was a force to be reckoned with. But as the remnants regrouped, their leader issued a command, and new forces emerged from the shadows, overwhelming them with numbers. The remnants were relentless, and Max could feel the weight of the fight pressing down on them both. Suddenly, there was a burst of movement from behind, and another figure appeared from the trees. It was another alien, tall and slender, with dark red skin and piercing yellow eyes. She was dressed in a similar style to Azera, but there was something different about her, something wild and free in the way she moved. "Need some help?" the new alien asked, her voice strong but filled with an unexpected warmth. Max didn't hesitate. "Yes, please," he said, his voice filled with urgency. The red-skinned alien nodded, a fierce smile crossing her face. Without another word, she lunged into the fray, her movements quick and deadly. Max watched in shock as she took down several of the remnants with ease, her weapon glowing brightly as she swung it with precision. Azera glanced at her, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Lyra," she said, recognition in her voice. "You survived." The red-skinned alien, now known as Lyra, grinned as she fought off another soldier. "You didn't think I would let you face them alone, did you?" she said, her tone playful but deadly serious. Max had no idea who Lyra was, but it was clear she was an ally. She moved with the kind of confidence and skill that Max could only admire, and her presence made the odds feel just a little bit better. Azera's enemies were tough, but with Lyra's help, the fight seemed more winnable. The remnants weren't giving up easily. They continued to press forward, but now, with the three of them fighting together, the battle was becoming more balanced. Azera and Lyra worked in perfect sync, their movements complementary as they took down enemy after enemy. Max, unsure of how much help he could be, tried to assist where he could, throwing rocks at soldiers or using his wrench as an improvised weapon when the chance arose. "Stay close," Azera called out to him during a brief pause in the fighting. "Don't try to be a hero, Max. We've got this." Max nodded, grateful for her guidance. He had never imagined being in a fight like this, but he couldn't let her down. He stuck close to Azera, watching her every move and learning as they went. There was so much about her that was incredible, but it was her resilience, her ability to stay calm in the face of danger, that impressed him most. Lyra, meanwhile, continued to take down the enemy with ease, her every move sharp and purposeful. As the battle continued, Max realized something important. They weren't just fighting for Azera anymore. They were fighting for each other. Despite the danger, despite the odds, Max felt a surge of hope. They had Azera, they had Lyra, and most importantly, they had each other. Together, they were stronger than the remnants had ever imagined. The tide of the battle was turning. The remnants were retreating, their confidence shaken by the unexpected power of their enemies. With a final, coordinated strike from Azera and Lyra, the remnants scattered into the darkness, leaving Max and his newfound allies standing victorious. Max stood there, panting, his heart still racing. He had survived his first battle in a galaxy that seemed so far beyond anything he had ever known. And now, with Azera and Lyra by his side, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The battle had ended, but the silence that followed was almost as loud as the clash itself. Max stood amidst the wreckage, trying to catch his breath. The once quiet clearing was now a scene of chaos. But despite the destruction, a strange sense of relief washed over him. They had won. Azera, standing beside him, surveyed the battlefield with a look of quiet satisfaction. Her silver eyes scanned the retreating figures of the remnants as they disappeared into the distance, their forces broken and scattered. Max could see the weight lifting from her shoulders, though he knew the fight wasn't over. This was only one battle in what would surely be many more to come. Lyra, the red-skinned warrior, was already checking the fallen soldiers, making sure they wouldn't pose any more danger. She moved with an effortless grace, a natural warrior who seemed to find peace in the chaos. Max couldn't help but admire her strength, but his eyes kept drifting back to Azera. There was something about her that made him feel like they were part of something much bigger. She had trusted him with everything, and now he knew he had to return that trust. Azera turned to him with a small smile. "You did well, Max," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Max blinked, still catching his breath. "I didn't really do much," he said, glancing down at his dirty hands. "I just helped where I could." "You did more than you think," Azera said, her tone serious now. "You stood by me when others would have run. That is worth more than any weapon or skill." Max felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure what he had expected when he made the decision to help her, but hearing her say that made it feel like it was all worth it. He had helped her, and she had helped him in return. They were a team now, not just allies, but partners in a cause neither of them fully understood yet. Lyra approached them, her face serious but with a hint of a grin. "The remnants won't be back anytime soon," she said, wiping her blade clean. "But they'll be watching. This is just the start." Max nodded. He knew the fight wasn't over. Azera's enemies were powerful, and they wouldn't give up easily. But he also knew that he wasn't alone anymore. With Azera by his side, and now Lyra as well, they had a fighting chance. "We need to move," Azera said, her voice firm. "The remnants will regroup, and we can't afford to be caught off guard. We must prepare." Max followed her, his heart still racing from the battle, but now filled with determination. He had never imagined he'd be in a fight like this, never thought he'd be standing side by side with an alien queen and a skilled warrior. But now, as they walked away from the battlefield, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The future was uncertain, and Max knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. Azera had given him a chance to be part of something bigger than himself, and he would do whatever it took to help her rebuild. As they walked together, Max glanced at Azera, her silver eyes focused on the path ahead. She had been through so much: loss, pain, and loneliness, but she was still standing strong. She had asked him to help her, to stay with her, and he had made a promise. And now, more than ever, he was ready to keep it. "We'll get through this," Max said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Azera glanced at him, her smile soft but full of trust. "Together," she said simply. The three of them continued their journey, knowing that the battles ahead would be tough, but with each other, they were stronger. They had already started to rebuild what had been broken, and as long as they stood together, Max knew that anything was possible. This was just the beginning of their new beginning. The days following their victory were filled with a new kind of tension. They had driven back the remnants for now, but Azera knew they wouldn't stop until they had finished what they started. The feeling of uncertainty was always in the air, but it was different now. It wasn't just Azera and Max anymore. It was the three of them: Azera, Max, and Lyra. Together, they were a team, ready to face whatever came next. Max spent his days learning more about Azera's people and their technology. He had no idea what he was doing most of the time, but Azera and Lyra guided him. Azera shared stories of her world, how it had once been a place of beauty and peace. Now it was a broken, desolate place that she was determined to rebuild. Max didn't fully understand the depth of what she had lost, but he was beginning to see the weight she carried on her shoulders. Despite the constant threat of danger, there were moments of peace. Azera and Lyra would sit together, discussing strategies, while Max found himself drifting between them, learning from their quiet determination. He didn't belong in their world. He wasn't an alien. He didn't have the skills or the power they did, but somehow he felt needed. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something important. One evening, as the three of them sat around a small campfire near their temporary base, Max looked up at the stars. The same stars he had always seen from Earth, but tonight, they felt different. The galaxy seemed much larger now, filled with unknown dangers, but also endless possibilities. Azera glanced at him, noticing his thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Max turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm just thinking about how everything's changed. 1 minute, I'm just a guy fixing cars, and now I'm part of something I never could have imagined." Azera smiled gently. "I know what you mean. I never thought I would find someone like you, someone who would stay with me. But you've become an important part of my world." Max swallowed, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to hearing such things, and yet it felt natural coming from her. "I didn't expect any of this. But I don't want to go back. I'm with you, Azera, for as long as you'll have me." Azera reached out, placing a hand on his. It was warm, comforting, and Max could feel the sincerity in her touch. "You are a part of this now, Max. You've helped me more than you know." Lyra, who had been sitting quietly beside them, spoke up. "You've come a long way, human. You've proven yourself more than just an ally. You've become a friend, and that's something few can say." Max looked at Lyra, surprised by her words. He had always seen her as a fierce warrior, someone who didn't have time for niceties. But there was respect in her eyes now. "I don't know what the future holds," Max said, his voice steady, "but I know I'm not backing down. Not now." Azera nodded, her gaze softening. "And neither will I. We will rebuild, Max. We will show the galaxy that we are stronger than the forces that wish to tear us apart." The fire crackled as the night stretched on, but Max wasn't afraid anymore. The fear he had once felt was replaced by something else, something stronger. Hope. He had found a new purpose. He wasn't just helping Azera. He was standing beside her, facing the future together. And though the road ahead would be difficult, with challenges they could not yet see, Max knew that with Azera and Lyra by his side, they could face anything. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknowns, but they were no longer alone in it. They had each other, and that was all they needed. Max smiled to himself, looking up at the stars once more. This was only the beginning of a new future, and he was ready to walk it with them. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the landscape. Max stood beside Azera and Lyra, watching the sky change colors as the day came to an end. It had been a long journey, filled with battles, uncertainty, and unexpected friendships. But now, standing here with the two people who had become his family, Max felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The fight with the remnants was far from over, but something had shifted. Azera, the alien queen who had once been alone in the vast emptiness of space, had found something she thought she had lost forever. And Max, the mechanic from Earth, had found a purpose he never expected. Together, they were building a new future, one step at a time. "I never thought I would find this," Azera said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet awe. She looked at Max with a softness in her eyes that spoke of all the things she had been through and all the things they had shared. A partner, a friend, a reason to keep going. Max glanced at her, feeling his heart swell with emotion. "You're not alone anymore, Azera," he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "We're in this together. I promised you that, and I'm keeping it." Azera smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Max feel as though everything they had gone through was worth it. She reached out and took his hand in hers, her fingers warm and comforting. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. "I know," she whispered, "and I will keep my promise too. We will rebuild this world. Together." Lyra, who had been silently watching the exchange, stepped forward. Her fierce warrior persona softened in this moment, and a rare smile tugged at her lips. "You two make a good team," she said, her voice playful. "But don't get too comfortable. The galaxy doesn't give up that easily." Max chuckled, grateful for Lyra's ability to lighten the mood. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, meeting her gaze. "We're not just fighting for Azera anymore. We're fighting for all of us." Azera looked at both of them, her expression filled with a deep sense of gratitude. "You've both given me something I never thought possible. A future, hope, and most importantly, love. You've shown me that the galaxy is not as lonely as I once thought." Max looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once felt so distant and cold. Now they felt different. They were no longer a symbol of Azera's lost past, but of her future, of their future. They had each other, and together, they could face whatever came next. "I don't know what the future holds," Max said, his voice filled with determination. "But I do know that as long as we're together, there's nothing we can't face." Azera squeezed his hand. "And I promise you, Max, we will make this world what it was always meant to be. We will rebuild. We will rise." The three of them stood there, side by side, as the stars above them shimmered like diamonds in the night sky. It was a quiet moment, but it was one filled with everything they needed: hope, strength, and the unwavering promise that no matter what happened, they would always stand together. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the road would be long. But for the first time, Max knew that he wasn't alone. He had found a family in the most unexpected place, and together, they would change the course of the galaxy. The future was theirs to shape, and they would do it, hand in hand, with the promise of forever guiding them. And in that moment, beneath the endless stars, Max knew that no matter how dark the universe might get, they would always have each other.